sorry to rush you away from what sounded like a wonderful elephant sighting with Jamie, but not to worry, because you're about to have one with us. I'm just going to reposition the vehicle ever so slightly. I want to do it quite hastily because this whole herd of elephants is going to pass in front of us, which will be quite beautiful. There we go. This should work well. They're all coming up to investigate us. They're everywhere, all around us, holding their trunks up into the air. Beautiful. The youngsters really putting on a show. As I'm told, you also got spoiled with some great sightings with Jamie. Another big cow. Well, certainly seem to be lots of elephants about this morning, and they're not territorial, so always wonderful when they are numerous in numbers on Djuma and Arathusa, because they make for such wonderful viewing. And even when they aren't in the most entertaining of moods, they are still generally always doing something, which makes for great viewing. So just to update you on some other important animals that have been found just north of Arathusa on Sibambili, it's the Birmingham males. 5 male lions that have been found. Sadly though, we are not permitted to go there, but at least we know where they are, and maybe they will pop onto Arathusa a little bit later on this morning, and that way we would be able to see them this afternoon, hopefully. And other than that, there's not too much going on. They're not too sure where Shadow is, a female leopard who was viewed yesterday afternoon. But we are in that general area now, and that's why I've come here in the hope that we can find her. I haven't seen a leopard for approaching 3 weeks now, and I'm beginning to get desperate cravings to change that. And he's attempting to try and seduce this female, which is below him. They're beautiful, beautiful pigeons that are brightly green in color and have a red and yellow bill as well as a bright turquoise blue eye. And they were hopping from branch to branch, the male on the top evidently chasing the female, but they seem to have calmed down as we got the camera on them. There we go, there's a beautiful view. Look at that, bright yellow feathers and legs. What an awesome bird. In Afrikaans or Dutch, one of the local South African languages, it's called a papegaaidove, which means a parrot dove, which I think is a wonderful description for the bird. Now the only reason that I know that this is the male on the top is because of his behavior. The male and females look exactly the same. There's no features that you can look at and distinguish them. It's just that he was hopping around wildly after her. So some of the birds out here have got a drastic difference in plumage and coloration between male and female, but the African green pigeons look identical. I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of feral pigeons which occur across the globe, and how the males will inflate a throat pouch and then let out a call. This pigeon is no different, just a slight variation. And it's the males that will inflate their throat pouch, and he was trying to do the same thing, only that this female was not interested in his advances. I'm hoping if we're just a little bit patient, we will get to see a bit more of this pigeon flirting, and We don't often get to see these pigeons out in the open, especially not in the summer months. In winter, when it's very cold in the morning, they're prone to sunning themselves on open dead trees like this. But in the summer months, we very seldomly see them. They are quite secretive pigeons and actually feed on fruits, so often in the canopies of very thick fruit trees. Just going to creep forward a couple of meters and see if we can't get a slightly better view of both of them. This should be a lot better. Not quite there. So not better at all for now. Just trying to turn the vehicle so Jean-Andre can get a good angle. That's better. Beautiful. There they both are, and you can see that they look very, very similar to one another. What's interesting is that they flew into this dead tree and were hopping around wildly just for about 5 seconds, and now have calmed down and are at ease with one another. But maybe they've already been doing a lot of mating and courtship this morning and now need a break. Now, from mating to egg laying is often quite short in terms of period of time with the birds, so they could be mating now and be laying the eggs within just a couple of weeks. And then incubation is often also short, usually around 3 weeks, depending on the bird. So within about just over a month, they could have little hatchlings. And again, this is just a very broad generalization for birds of this size, and just to give you an idea of what goes on before the chicks hatch. And then depending on the bird species, some little hatchlings will be able to kind of fend for themselves, just need parental guidance. And other birds, like the young chicks of these African green pigeons, will need very special care and attention. They cannot feed themselves, they cannot fly, they will be nest bound for probably around 3 to 4 weeks before they fledge. And like most doves and pigeons, I'm sure it's not going to be a masterpiece. Their nest, quite a haphazardly constructed platform of twigs. I saw a Cape Turtle dove's nest the other day when we were out tracking with Steph, and there was barely enough twigs to hold up the eggs in the nest. You could see quite clearly, oh beautiful, you could see quite clearly from underneath the nest the eggs lying within it, and that understandably indicates to you that it is not a very thick platform of twigs. And if I was to give you a rough idea, I mean, you could really see quite clearly through the base of the nest. If it was lying flat like that, or bowl shaped rather, you could really see such huge gaps between it. Whereas other birds like the flycatchers and the sunbirds and the weavers are incredible nest builders. And hopefully we'll be able to track down some of their nests for you. I wish I had the call of the African green pigeon to put play you because Valerie has just asked if they sound like regular pigeons, and no, they don't. It was merely their kind of mating techniques that are similar to the feral pigeon, but they've got one of the most wonderful calls in Africa, the African green pigeon. And I will try and do my imitation of it for you, which is not going to be anything like the real deal, but possibly humorous if nothing else. And it goes kwee, kwee, kuruk, 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 kuruk. Something like that. But it may be worth just searching for African green pigeon audio on the internet machine and see what you come up. But it goes something like is how it finishes. The finishes the best in terms of my impersonation. My start is a bit weak, so probably doesn't resemble too much of the real thing. But that's just their regular contact call. I guess it's not necessarily their mating call that they'll make to try and seduce another pigeon, like the regular feral pigeons when they're doing that with their big throats puffed out. So we're going to continue searching for any tracks or signs of shadow, and in the meantime we will send you, well, just in a few seconds actually, let's just enjoy the sights. And we've just stumbled upon a waterbuck. Oh, it doesn't seem to be wanting to hang around. There he is, kind of looking at us, but not easy to see. Let me see if I can't roll forward a few meters and get you into a bit of a gap. This should work. There we go. Beautiful big waterbuck bull. Little boy, I love it when they do that with their noses. Quite characteristic of the waterbuck. They've got the ability to really flex their nostrils. They've got distinctively heart-shaped nostrils, the waterbuck, that you would have seen jumping up and down. You also notice how it's swiveling its ears in all directions, making sure that one ear is facing forward, the other ear is facing back, so that they can listen to the sounds all around them, especially in a kind of windy day like this and thick vegetation. It's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking for this waterbuck. There go the nostrils again. Oh, now it's just started chewing the cud. So he's multitasking. He thought, well, while I wait here and watch these humans, I may as well make the most of my time and chew the cud as well. So it's just re-chewing some vegetable matter that he's already chewed on and swallowed, possibly for the third or fourth time. And what that means is, if you were to find some waterbuck dung or droppings, and we were to break it up between your fingers, it would be a very fine powder. Whereas the dung of the animals who do not ruminate and who do not process or chew their food very well will be less refined. Okay, Mr. Waterbuck, we're going to continue, but before we do, we'll send all of you guys across to Jamie. As I said, I'm going to be looking for leopard tracks, and she's got some interesting tracks that she would like to show you of another carnivore that we don't see as often as we would like to.
Well, unfortunately we had to leave our elephant herd because they're heading into some really thick bush, but keep an eye on the dam cam because they might be heading in that direction very shortly. I have a question for you guys. I want to see if you can figure out what track this is. So we're looking at this track here. It's a little bit tricky. It's one of the more difficult ones. So I'm going to give you a few hints. First of all, it might be a bit difficult to see, so I'm going to give you the outline. This is the outline of the back pad, and it has two lobes, and it's almost triangular in appearance. It's got two lobes in the sole, and then, most importantly, probably one of the biggest giveaways, the front toes are here, and there's something else that's made an impression in the sand, maybe about a centimeter away from the front of the front toes. There's something that's touched here, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. I want to see if you guys can guess and tell me what you think it is. I've seen one on this road before, only once. I'm hoping to see one again. But it's come down all the way down this road. And the animal responsible for this track walks regular pathways up and down. The foot is about this big. That's the size, that's the length of the foot. So about the length of my finger. What do you guys think that it is? You can send that answer through to #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarth.tv. And I'm not going to give you any further hints because otherwise I'm going to give it away. There's two animals that it could possibly be walking up and down with that shaped track, and they're really similar. And once you've got it right, when you get it right, because I have a lot of faith in our viewers, when you get it right, then we can talk a little bit more and I can show you some pictures that I have of the two different species. I've returned back to where Scott had the last leopard tracks and where those alarm calls were coming from. I'm hoping that he might be tucked away somewhere here. Bear with me, because as with all earpieces, I'm sure you've experienced this with your own headphones, no matter how gently you put them down, how organized they are when you take them out of your ears, by the time you get back to them, even if it is the space of 5 minutes, they've tied themselves in knots. Alright, I'm curious to hear if you can figure out which track that is. I'm actually very glad that those tracks survived because I saw them earlier and there's been a bit of traffic on this road, so we got lucky. It was one or two surviving tracks for us to show you. Before we disappeared off in an attack of the gremlins, we were chatting about elephant behavior, and Sean had asked what signs elephant gives. What are signs an elephant will give when they're serious about a charge? And Dave, who's watching from Texas, you were saying if they get too frisky and voice commands don't work, do you sound your horn at them? And the answer is no. That's a sound that is likely to provoke a serious charge. It's a difficult one because you'll see us doing things that I probably wouldn't recommend that you imitate when you're in Kruger. So talking sternly to an elephant, maybe if you can't get out of the situation as a last resort, that's the way to go. But for the most part, I would say if elephants are showing those signs of friskiness or aggression, then it's time for you to leave whenever safely possible, rather than shouting at them or try to deter them. What I sometimes do is I tap the car when my voice commands aren't working. It's not something I've had to do while I've been working at Djuma. I have had to do it in the past. And I either try and tap the side of the car gently, and it needs to be gentle because the hearing is very, very good. or I find something that makes a slightly metallic noise. So if I've got a piece of metal on me, then I use that to tap the side of the door. It's just a noise that breaks them out of that moment. But you must always be prepared for the fact that animals are unpredictable. And if that elephant goes quiet and starts running towards you with its ears shut and its trunk rolled up, it is time to leave, and it's time to leave fast. I've only ever, because I've worked in reserves where it is good ethics to teach elephants good manners. So you don't teach them that by coming up and giving people a fright in the car, that car's going to run away. Then it becomes a game. So I generally avoid driving away from elephants unless absolutely necessary. The only time I've ever raced away from an elephant was at night. I pulled off the road, I turned off my lights because there was another car full of guests coming, and I just heard it. I didn't hear a thing, it didn't scream at me, I couldn't see it, I just heard running footsteps off to my left. And because of the situation, I just put my foot down, lifted the clutch and sped off up the hill. And the elephant shot out right where the car had been. Then it turned and screamed at me, and then it ran away. But even then, I drove away a little bit and stopped, just so I was out of the elephant's space. But we're reading elephant behavior, and we're responding in a way that I wouldn't necessarily advise for people driving their rental cars within Kruger. And it's very much a matter of circumstance as well. It seems as though Scott has had some wonderful bird action on Arathusa, and it's continuing now. Let's head across to him. I will be back with you in a moment.
So we've got a really interesting sighting happening here. This is a Lavalian's cuckoo. It's the same cuckoo we saw yesterday. And the birds that are chasing it there now are Aramark babblers. Watch it closely. It's hard for Jean-Andre. He's going to have to swing the camera around a bit from side to side in order to get the shots. But what's happening there is that the Lavalian's cuckoo, who we saw yesterday and spoke about yesterday, the only bird that it will parasitize is the Aramark babbler, which are the birds that are now currently chasing it. So they obviously know that it's trying to lay its egg in their nest and then allow them to raise its chick, which is of course not what they want. So this is a battle going on here. I really wonder where the Aramark babbler's nest is. If we stick around here long enough, we may actually be able to see it. But let's just be patient and see if we can't get to see the babblers chasing the cuckoo one or two more times. So I think you're getting some good views, also some good audio coming through. Let's try to creep a little bit closer, because they're so caught up with one another's agendas that I think we may be able to get a bit closer in without them being too bothered by our presence. And who knows, maybe we'll even get to see the nest of the Aramark babblers. Right in front of us. An incredible view. There goes the babbler, chasing it. Boom! This is awesome. I've never seen interaction like this between cuckoos and babblers. And you may find what's happening is that not one but two cuckoos are trying to distract. Yeah, that's what's happening. Jean-Andre, have you got them?
No, it's a woodpecker.
Lower down here, or just stay on the cuckoos, please, at 1 o'clock. There we go, right in there. So there's the Aramark babbler, and then bottom left of your screen, just straight in, Jean-Andre, if you zoom straight in, there's the cuckoo, and it's kind of acting distressed. shaking its wing feathers, trying to create a distraction. I'm sure that's what it's doing. By coming down onto the ground and shaking its wing feathers like that, it's almost creating a target for some of the babblers to rush in towards. And while those babblers are there, I'm sure the other cuckoo will be trying to get to their nest, which they will already know its position, but now getting their egg in there is the next problem. Let's creep forward a little bit more. Now something that has just come through is a good question from Chris, and it's all happening. Chris is wondering whether the babblers will be able to throw the egg of the cuckoo out of the nest. And the cuckoos are very clever. Their eggs will look so similar to that of the babblers that once the egg is in the ground, I'm just going to creep forward ever so. Oh no, here they come again. What they'll do is, oh, right towards us, right in front of our vehicle. This is crazy. So much going on, and Jandre's doing a great job, guys. It's incredibly difficult to film a scenario like this live and not be able to cut and paste it together afterwards without you guys getting seasick, but we're going for it because this is high intensity. Cuckoo's just landed straight in front of us again. I wonder where their nest is. It must be somewhere in this area. They're flying all around us. 2 cuckoos and about 4 or 5 babblers. Isn't this awesome? Hard to tell exactly what's going on, but you can tell that the cuckoos are really insistent in being in this area, and the babblers are doing their best to chase them away. And the babblers are cooperative breeders. They live in families of about 5 to 6 birds with a dominant pair of adults. It's just going bananas here. And it's the cuckoos who are making the most noise. I've just seen some feathers being plucked out of one. The babblers aren't taking any chances here. Oh, there's their nest, there's their nest. I've just seen their nest. Incredible. Well done, Jandre. That's their nest up in the fork of this acacia tree. It's hard to see it there, but I'm fairly certain that in that fork is where the nest is, and that's where maybe not though. They don't nest in cavities in trees. They make a very big loose nest with twigs. There seems to be a lot of jostling around that spot there. Can you believe the ongoings here? Literally the Aramark babblers who you're looking at now pulled some feathers out of the Levalian's cuckoo, and they were just seen drifting off into the wind. So this is a very serious affair here, and the babblers are doing their best to try and keep their nest safe. Now, I'm guessing the nest is somewhere in this dead knobthorn tree to our right, but on second looks, but it could be just on the other side there. It's hard to see a nest from this side, and I've actually never seen the nest of Aramark babblers before. I just know that it's a loosely constructed bed of twigs. I cannot believe we were speaking about this happening just yesterday, and we're already getting to see this remarkable interactions. Now what's interesting is that certain cuckoos will be less fussy with regards to who their foster parents will be, but the Levalian's cuckoo, which is the ones we've been viewing now, will only target the Aramark babbler. It is the only bird that will be able to raise their young, Whereas some of the other cuckoos will be able to use starlings as a broader species, or weavers, and not have to use a specific individual like this. Well, that was some serious high intensity viewing, and sorry if you got a little bit seasick along the way, but like I say, this is a live safari and we'll do whatever it takes to get you the shots. And I think Jean-Andre did an incredible job swinging that camera around as smoothly as he did, because he was making it look far easier than it actually is to film something like that in this thick vegetation. But for now, it looks like the babblers have won, and no further sign of the cuckoos. They may need to go elsewhere in search of a babbler nest. I wonder how long it takes them to actually be able to find a potential host for their young. That in itself must be a challenge, and then getting your egg into that nest is the cuckoo's next challenge, which clearly is not an easy one if anything standards are if this morning's standards are anything to go by. Those babblers were not taking any chances and doing a great job in keeping the cuckoos at bay. Phew! Wow. One moment you're hoping to find leopard tracks, the next moment you are thoroughly enjoying such an interesting sighting. Like I said, in all my years in the bush, I've never seen such quality interactions between cuckoos and the birds that they parasitize. And at one stage, like I said, sadly you didn't get to see it, but one of the babblers came in and literally plucked feathers out of a cuckoo that were just left wafting off in the air. Well done, babblers. Good job. Speaking of cuckoos, I didn't forget about the Deirdre's cuckoo, which we heard earlier on the safari up at Red Dam. We sent you back to Jamie shortly after we were leaving that area, but hung around for a while hoping to hear its calls to get us a little bit closer by, but it had gone silent. So we're just going to have to wait until it calls again, and hopefully we'll be closer by and be able to pinpoint its location. So I hope all of you are making good headway in Jamie's tracking quiz that she's performed for you guys, and she wants to get you back onto those tracks and finish up the quiz. So good luck, and we will catch up a little bit later.
It seems as though I have caught the majority of you out. Now, if we didn't have people who got it correct, I might have thought that I'd made it a bit too difficult. Maybe it wasn't clear. But we do have 3 very clear winners, the Triple L, Lisa, Lynn, and, hold on, Lisa, Lynn, there's one more. Give me a moment. And Lily, Lisa, Lily, and Lynn, the three of you got it right. Thanks, Dora. I had a momentary brain freeze. You guys got it right. You said it was a honey badger. It was a difficult one. It really was. It was tricky. I know the majority of you said it was cheetah. It is not cheetah. You also suggested jackal, would have been a bit smaller, serval, and there were also a couple of other guesses around civet and so on. But you were correct, Lisa, Lily, and Lynn, and I'm going to show you why, because it was a difficult one. Bear with me a moment as we stop here on Impala Plains with our herd of impala to watch our tracking lesson. I did keep my places in my book. I expected more answers to include porcupine, because that is the one that, keeping my place with Quarry Bush, that is the one that would have been the most easy to confuse it with. This is a porcupine track, and it's most identifiable from the honey badger because it's got multiple lobes in the back pad. So remember, I was chatting to you a little bit about how it only has 2 lobes. That is what I was expecting most of you to confuse it with. And in terms of the honey badger, these tracks that I'm showing you now are exact size, although in this case it was a slightly smaller individual, but these tracks are the right size. This is the honey badger track. This is the track that I was showing you. Look, it was in soft sand, but there's the 2 lobes that we could see with the toes, and then most importantly with the distance. That was another hint I was giving you. The distance from the toe to the claw is just over a centimeter. A very big track, or a very big distance between the tracks of the claws and the toes, because honey badgers have such enormously long claws, powerful digging claws. Now, we've been looking at dung beetles, and just while I have this picture in front of me, if we have a look down here, I've spoken about how the dung beetle digs down and buries the ball of dung and lays its larva in there. This is what it looks like when a honey badger digs it up. It's got a cavity in the middle where the honey badger's broken it open with a combination of claws and teeth and dug in to pull the larva out. And it's something we're always on the lookout, and I'm sure at some point we will find in the summer months, we'll find where the honey badgers have been digging it out. Now, one more thing I want to show you. One of the other tracks that it was confused with. Almost the right size, although a cheetah is slightly bigger. But most importantly, what I would have pointed out to you would be the 3 lobes at the back. Cheetah have very distinctive 3 lobes, just like all of our big cats that we go out and track. And they make for quite a sharp corner. But they are very clear. So yes, although the cheetah does have claws, it doesn't have that asymmetrical triangular shaped lobe. It's more of an oblong shape, a sort of more egg-shaped track. And there you can see the lobes. And if we look down just a little bit at this picture here, you can see the sharp track, the sharp corners in the sand of the back lobe, as well as the more widely spaced toes. And ever so slightly bigger. I can also promise you that if it had been a cheetah in the sand there, we would have been frantically driving in that direction. The chances of tracking a honey badger, however, are a little bit more tricky. Okay, well, that concludes our tracking lesson for the day, but a very well done, very big well done to Lisa and Lynn and Lily for getting that answer correct. Now, it sounds like you had an amazing bird sighting with those cuckoos right at the point of trying to breed with Scott. We've got another bird here that's fairly rare. I'm going to shift forward a little bit. I think we've seen them a lot now. They've settled down on Impala Plains. We've got a little Senegal lapwing, and I think they must be nesting around here as well, pecking away at the various grass seeds. A bird, it's a lapwing that you actually don't see too often. We've been spoiled because they've been nesting here, but we don't always see them. I'm still trying to follow up on this leopard. I don't know where he's disappeared to. I've been checking all around, looping the area, but no sign of him so far. I know that Tingana likes this block up ahead of us. I know because I followed him there and been stuck there in aardvark holes. I'm going to head across there. But this is a perfect time of year to see some amazing bird behavior. Although at the moment this lapwing is just feeding. I wonder where their nest site is hiding. I'm waiting to see if my Ellie herds come through. Interesting in terms of a bird that we haven't seen. Marco, you were mentioning that you haven't seen a Burchell's cuckoo in a while. We're wondering if they're migratory birds. They're not, although you only really hear them calling around the rainy season. I've also been keeping an eye out for them. I think the reason you haven't seen them for quite a while on our live safaris is the fact that we've had so little rain. I think they've moved closer towards the rivers and the more permanent flowing water sources. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the Burchell's cuckoo, it's also known as the rainbird because it always calls, supposedly always calls just before the first rains, although it quite often calls just afterwards as well. It's its breeding call, and that's the time when it breeds. And they are around.
What a great mix it's been this morning of some large, high-profile game like the African elephants, as well as a lot of birds. And for those of you who are new to the safari experience, it's important to know that it's not just about the big animals out here. It's often the smaller ones that we spend more time with. And they are equally interesting, just like that incredible sighting we've had of the cuckoos and the babblers. The bird we can hear calling now, I think is a brew-brew. B-R-U, but we're going to need to try and find it to double check that. There's a lot of birds jumping around these trees, so it's a bit of a bird party going on. Let's take a look around here and see if we can't work out who's who. Nothing to see initially as we scan this big knobthorn tree. While we wait here, we can answer a question from Eddie Abbey. And they're interested to know, when will the babblers realize that they have been duped by the cuckoos? And it's before the cuckoos will even lay the egg. They know exactly what's going on. And what they were trying to do there is prevent the cuckoo from actually laying the egg in the nest. Once the cuckoo has laid the egg in the nest, well, then the babblers can't do anything. And what's interesting is that they will continue to raise that cuckoo, which is a bigger bird than themselves, and the cuckoo chick will be bigger than its foster parents in a very short space of time. And they won't then stop feeding it. They will think it's one of their own, so they don't have the ability to work out that they have raised a chick to a point where they can then realize that it's not their own. They will continue to raise it until adulthood. So really interesting stuff, and I guess those babblers just knew that the cuckoos were intruding and they're trying to stop that intrusion from happening, and that's what we saw. But once, like I said, the egg is in the nest, the cuckoo's job is done. And what's interesting is that the cuckoos also give birth, lay an egg, which is well developed and will therefore often hatch before the eggs of the foster parents or the hosts. So they're highly specialized and designed. They therefore probably do have the ability to withhold the egg for a certain amount of time. I'm not sure how long. And Barbara's interested to know the answer to that question. How long will they be able to hold their eggs for before giving birth? I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not even sure if the scientists know the answer to that question. There will be a limit though. They're not going to be able to withhold eggs just as humans and other mammals will not be able to hold back their baby from being born until the time that suits them. Well, the large birds of prey that you can see, well, that one there is a martial eagle, I believe. It's a massive bird with a wingspan of about 2.5 meters. And it's not quite warm enough for it to be flapping or floating effortlessly, and every now and then it has to beat its wings, but that is a monster of the skies. It's just very, very far away. There's also a few very small birds, swifts and swallows, shooting through the screen like little fighter jets. Great! Well, the birding continues. The cuckoos are specialists in depositing extra eggs into nests of other birds, and now Lise is asking whether monkeys are responsible for plucking eggs out of these nests. And yes, monkeys and baboons will feed on both eggs and baby chicks. They are omnivorous, just like us. And I actually heard about a baboon which caught a steenbok just a few days ago. Nikki's father's been in the Kruger Park with some friends, and one of the members or one of the vehicles in their safari crew was fortunate, or I guess unfortunate enough, to see a baboon walking across one of the roads with a tiny baby steenbok dangling out of its mouth. So the primates out here are prone to the odd meaty meal, and birds, eggs as well as chicks will be high up on their list of summer treats. Hello to Janine, and thank you for alerting my brain to the thought of snakes. Janine's interested to know if we've seen any snakes recently, and I personally haven't seen one, but I think Jean-Andre saw a couple when he returned from leave just a few days before me. A snouted cobra was one of those snakes, along with a few others. It definitely is snake season, Janine, and I'm guessing it won't be too long before we get lucky and spot one again. And on the topic of animals that eat birds, there's a strong chance that we will find a snake this summer with a bird kill. A lot of the snakes in this area are arboreal. The boom slug, the vine snake, the black mamba, and being arboreal, naturally it's a good place to feed on and catch birds. So that could well happen. Another thing that could happen is a bird could catch the snake. There's a few eagles out here that would love to and quite happily attack, kill and feed on snakes, as venomous as a lot of the snakes in this area may be. And Another thing that we've been discussing a lot is birds' eggs and what may consume them and what may happen with the cuckoos laying their extra eggs in other birds' nests. And there are a few snakes out here which are specialized in eating eggs. And they'll swallow them whole. They've got two kind of tooth-like protrusions at the back of their head or the back of their mouth. And once they've swallowed the egg, the pressure of the kind of front mouth parts pushing the egg back against these tooth-like protrusions will break the egg, and that way allow the snake to crush and swallow an entire egg. Good morning, zebra. Why are you holding your ears in such a funny position like that? You are looking quite sheepish. Have you been misbehaving yourself? It's the stallion of the sorrow. Maybe the women are giving him a hard time this morning. Or possibly it's just the wind that he's trying to avoid listening to very clearly. It's quite windy here, as you can see from the bushes in the background, and by flattening his ears like that he will be avoiding picking up the loud kind of wind that a lot of us would be aware of when speaking to somebody who's in a windy place. On a cell phone, I guess, would be one way of thinking of it. Their hearing's so acute. You could kind of almost relate to the microphone of his phone picking up windy conditions. It's a place that they like to spend a lot of time here where we are on the Arathusa airstrip. You can see perfectly short grass, which zebra enjoy feeding on. And it's also a safe place for them in open areas that then, even though it's just a long thin strip either side of the airstrip, it does provide a little safe haven for them. They've got a really wonderful call that sadly they don't call out very often, but it goes something a little bit like this. And you can see by the stallion's immediate response there that I just wanted to double check that I wasn't another stallion coming in to try and steal one of his ladies. And even though it's not the breeding season now, and some of the females within this herd will probably give birth in the coming month or so, although none of them look heavily pregnant. Maybe that's just me. But even though it's not the breeding season, he will still try and defend his harem as best as possible. Hello, Dr. Debbie. And on the topic of mating, you would like to know which is the most interesting mating display or call I have seen. Phew. Not an easy one. Tortoises are always good quality to watch, but that's more humorous than anything else. Baboons are also quite interesting, as they are very, very vocal. Oh, 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 is the noise that you'll hear when baboons mate, which is absolutely wonderful, I think. So keep an eye out for that, although we don't get to see baboons very often. So that's probably not going to happen too soon. Shame, the foal that's just walked into the screen now has got an injury on its front left leg. Not too sure what it is. It just seems to be nursing it a little bit as it begins to try and nurse from its mother. I think you're a bit too old to be drinking milk, but the mother seems to be tolerating it, surprisingly. But there's a wide variety of interesting mating calls. The Cory Bustard, which you were speaking about earlier, has got a beautiful display where it will erect a lot of its feathers on its back and front, making it look like an inflatable kind of white balloon. A lot of the birds have got the most impressive of mating displays. Some of the birds of paradise that don't occur here in Africa are also worth having a look at, because they have got incredible mating displays to try and seduce the opposite sex. But one of the most impressive acts of mating that I've ever witnessed is that of the African elephant, Dr. Debbie. That, for me, is something that I'd love to see again. I've only seen it once, and it is basically a monument of love being made. It's possibly 10 tons of passion combined together. Speaking of passion, there doesn't seem to be too much passion going on with these zebras. I think we're going to continue before I fall asleep, along with the stallion. Wonderful animals though, the zebra. And I'm looking forward to seeing some young zebra foals, along with a lot of small animals that should be born in the coming weeks. Impalas, wildebeests, a lot of the herbivores are going to start giving birth. And I hear some of you have either enjoyed or are continuing to discuss my impression of baboons mating, or the audio that you hear when they do so. Just going to try and find a way to best cross this airstrip. I'm not too sure what it is, so let's just head across here, look right and look left beforehand, make sure no airplanes are coming. That would be embarrassing. Great question through on the topic of cuckoos, and it can be applicable to a lot of other animals, not only cuckoos. And this is from Jennifer in Toronto, and she would like to know, how does this young cuckoo chick who is raised by foster parents then know what to do as an adult cuckoo? And I guess, like a lot of animals, once it's been raised to adulthood, the most tricky part of their life is those initial stages where it needs to be fed and looked after, but thereafter instinct will kick in. And leopard, lion, a lot of the animals are not dissimilar to a young cuckoo. And even if a young leopard, for example, was raised by a pride of lion, once it grew up, its natural instincts would cause it to probably leave that pride and live a solitary life and go off and look for other leopards to mate with. But it is a good question and certainly does make you think. But there's obviously nothing that its parents will have to do other than lay that egg in terms of raising it to adulthood. Thereafter, it's just going to know what to do through instinct, which is how most animals will operate. Most leopards won't necessarily get taught how to hunt by their parents, but they'll instinctively know to chase something that runs away from it. And even though time to time, you get certain predators like the cheetah, which will hold on to prey that they've caught in order to teach their cubs what to do. Even without doing that, you'd probably find cheetah cubs do have that natural instinct to chase something that runs away from it. I think I've got myself into a tricky spot now after mimicking the baboons mating. Now Lisa's asking me to mimic the sound of tortoises mating, and I'll have a crack at it. It's kind of like a wheezing squeak. It's like it's lots of breathing. But again, you may want to research elsewhere tortoises mating if you would like to have a laugh or compare it to my tortoise mating audio. Enough of the foolery now with me, and over to Jamie, who's hopefully got a slightly more serious topic for you.
My goodness me, sounds as though Scott has been giving you quite the performance. Things I'm not going to do, I'm not going to imitate the noise buffalo make whilst mating before that request comes through. But shame, this old boy looks like he might be past that stage of life. Walking very slowly, hip bones are quite prominent. He's an old man. I don't think those sorts of thoughts are on his mind anymore. He's looking for a nice cool place. I think he was trying to get hold of some mud. Unfortunately for him, the Djuma dam is pretty much dry, although he could go up to the pan if he really wanted to. Now, I'm not sure, just as he was walking past, you might have seen there were a load of oxpeckers on him, and they're flying backwards and forwards from the water to him. And that is because, I think because he's slowly reaching the end of his health, his tick load must be much larger than other buffalo, and buffalo do have a lot of ticks on them. You can see he's walking with some degree of difficulty. Poor old boy. He's probably, I would say, quite close to being maybe 13, 14. You can see I'm going to shift around to the other side of the dam. I don't want to stress him out, obviously, but he is moving away from us, so I'll shift around to get us a better view. But you can see as he struggles through. I can tell he's old, first of all by the way that he's walking, but also the fact that his horns are pretty chipped and broken. He's broken the tips off both of them. Let's see if we can get a nice view of him as he comes through onto the dam wall. I don't want to disturb him, I don't want to make him run or expend any energy. Oh, bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. Dam camera. Give it a quick wave. For those of you new to our live safaris or joining us for the first time, if you haven't heard from our regular viewers, if you're not watching our live drives, then you can watch the dam cameras that are up at Djuma and Arathusa waterholes, and they broadcast 24/7. And now is a really good time, this time of year is a really good time to be watching them. It's unbelievably dry out here, and there's very little options in the way of water for the animals, so you're going to get a lot of amazing sightings on the dam cameras. Let's go see if we can loop around and have a look at this gentleman. I'm also just waiting to see, and keep your eyes peeled. I am sure that that elephant herd is going to come and have a drink at some stage today as it gets a little bit hotter. Oh, I'm very glad they fixed this road as well. They've made life a lot easier. And on a beautiful warm morning like today, where there's not a cloud in the sky, the sky is actually an unimaginable shade of blue. And I remember trying to describe this feeling when I lived in England, to try and describe the way an African sky feels so much bigger. It doesn't feel like the sky is on top of you, it's just this huge open space. Hello, boy. As I said, I'm not going to... Oh, shame. Don't stress, boy. I'm not going to go any closer to him. I don't want to make him nervous or feel like he has to expend more energy than he already has to. I wonder where the rest of the Duggar boys are. Usually these old gentlemen hang out with a group of them, and I think he's at the point where he can't quite keep up with the rest of the group. Goes disappearing off. I'm going to continue on my search for wonderful things, and I'm going to let our buffalo bull head off without disturbing him. But I believe Scott has a reptile to show you, so let's head across to him, and I will be back with you in just a few moments.
Oh, look at that. It just got a little bit of a fright as the Cape turtle dove started calling behind us, I guess. This is a triagama, also known as a blue-headed lizard. This is a female, however, and lacks the bright blue head. I guess you may be able to see a very slight tinge of blue on her head there, but the males, especially at this time of the year, will be sporting their bright blue head, their breeding coloration. And this one is relying on its incredible camouflage, and I'm convinced that it thinks we can't see it. They're usually quite shy and secretive, and if it had any idea that, or any concern that we had spotted it, it would probably be able to run around onto the other side of this tree. Just scouting around. It's sitting in a marula tree, and I'm hoping to see a male sunning itself nearby, but no luck. But I'm sure that in the coming weeks we will also get to show you the bright blue head of the male. Well, we're having great action this morning on safari, from the large buffalo bull with Jamie now to this tiny little reptile. We've seen birds, we've seen mammals, some really interesting stuff going on. Sadly though, the clock is ticking and we don't have too much time left of this sunrise safari, so let's keep moving and see what else we can stumble upon. The hours of this morning, I'm not too exactly sure when it went down. So that's good news that they've had a little meal. The other good news is that it's not a fully grown buffalo, because that would have kept them anchored on Sibambili, where we cannot go for longer than a baby buffalo will. So better prospects there. They are right on the northern fence line of the Sabi Sands, but it's only about 700 meters, about half a mile from that northern boundary to the northern boundary of Arathusa, where we can go. So possibly this evening they'll make their way into an area where we can view them. Failing that, we may have some other lions pop up with all the action that's been going on at the moment. Just like yesterday, we found the Birminghams in the morning, and the Salala Pride were seen mid-morning by somebody leaving Djuma. So that was a very pleasant surprise for the afternoon. To Mercedes in California, and Mercedes is interested to know that if the lioness that was with the Birmingham boys yesterday was from the Nkahuma Pride, this is all hypothetically speaking, would the Pride, the Nkahuma Pride, be accepted, the entire Pride be accepted by the Birmingham boys on their next meeting? And yes, quite possibly the fact that one lioness is building bonds with those males may quite well be enough to allow the rest of the lioness within her Pride to be accepted by them. I think that certainly is plausible. The only catch is that Junior, the young male, will definitely not be tolerated, regardless of how good a relationship the lioness have forged with the Birmingham boys. So Junior essentially is just a ticking time bomb, and the clock is ticking heavily against his favor. He's going to be in trouble sooner rather than later, either out on his own trying to find a new area or other males to join up with, or if he continues trying to fly below the radar with his natal Pride, I think he is going to come unstuck. Anyway, it's interesting stuff, and only time will tell. Tingana went. I think he may have a kill somewhere. We haven't found any more of his tracks, well, we didn't earlier on this morning when we were looping around the area around kind of quarantine, so I want to go back there and see if we can't find any more clues as to where he may have gone. That you saw an elephant with a recurved tusk going in the wrong direction with Jamie, and I wonder if it's the same one that we also saw a couple of weeks ago. A very large tusk growing backwards, also a beautiful elephant cow, and I know some of you may have nicknamed her Fang, interesting name for an elephant, but happy to roll with it. And Deb in Ohio is now asking whether I've ever seen an animal with any kind of deformity that actually through default acts or ends up benefiting the animal. So the animal adapts and learns how to use this deformity and use it to its advantage. And Deb, I can't think of anything that comes to mind immediately. Good news, we are going to send you across to Jamie, who's in a fortunate position with some more nesting birds.
Now, I know that you were discussing egg thieves and nest raiders with Scott, and here we have one of the biggest thieves. It's the African harrier hawk. I know you saw it on its nest yesterday with Scott. This is a very common specialized egg thief, which is why we see them so often mobbed by little birds like fork-tailed drongos, or even arrow-marked babblers like the ones that were fighting off the attentions of that cuckoo. You can see him shifting. This is a very shy bird for some reason. I mean, we've sat beneath the Wahlberg's eagles underneath their nests countless times, and they're more than happy with us. But this bird seems to prefer to have a little bit of distance. Now that we've had a good view of it with its bright yellow face, I'm going to try and roll forward sneakily and see if we can get a little bit closer and see a bit more detail on it. Come on, Wendy. Come on, Wendy. I don't know if this actually helps, but I'm pushing forward. Oh, by the way, the reason there is a guari bush now in my hair is because I'm hoping that will amplify the good luck that it's meant to bring, as well as fighting off our birdie gremlins. Oh, well, I think I might head back. Where's he going to go? Just stopped in that tree there. I'd actually forgotten I'd put the guari bush in my hair until we went live. I just did it as a little bit of luck for myself. At the top there of the marula trees, the view's still not great, unfortunately. He's tucked himself away. Do you see him there, Tebs? Well done. With those double jointed knees, or ankle joints, that allow it to grip onto a branch with one claw and reach backwards and into all of those sneaky hidden tunnels that the birds hide their eggs in. But not the most popular raptor out here in terms of its interactions with other birds. Don't think he wants to be seen though. Not gonna come any closer. Still no sign of where Tingana might be hiding, if indeed it is Tingana. Done a couple of loops of that particular area and haven't managed to find him, but I'm going to continue and have a look down into the drainage lines because maybe that's where he's hiding out. It's starting to get much warmer, so he might be seeking out shade around the edges. Amazing how the temperature has increased from when we set out this morning to now. Question, and I know Scott was discussing it earlier. We saw that elephant with a backwards facing tusk, and Deb has asked, have I ever seen an animal with a deformity that it could use to its advantage? I'm trying to think about it. That's a really interesting question because of course that's essentially evolution in action in its own way. A slight deformity might lead to an advantage unexpectedly. Oh, let me think. I've seen rhinos with very strange shaped horns, but I don't know if that helps them at all. Possibly what you could get, and that's not something I've seen, although I have seen plenty of deformed antelope horns, but that could be an advantage. I've never seen it in action, but it could be an advantage in that it for a moment there, so maybe because I took the guari bush out of the hat. Anyway, we apologize for that. So deformed animals maybe slightly different in shape. Because you've seen the way that impala clash and they knock into each other. Generally their horns meet in the middle. And if one had a straighter horn, it could confer quite a serious and dangerous advantage. I don't think this might work. That backward-facing tusk, I think in its own way is an interesting one. Because it might make digging up roots and so on a bit easier, even if it does get in her way every now and again. she might have learned to use it to her advantage, although I don't think it's going to confer more of an beyond that. Honestly, Deb, I can't think of any examples that might be more advantageous in terms of deformities. I think the most important one is any kind of deformity of the feet would be a disadvantage. I can't think of out. Using you all again, so we're going to head across to Scott. I will be back with you when my signals are back.
Well, we're getting closer to the area where Tingana, I'm guessing Tingana, at least a large male leopard's tracks were moving. Scanning up in all the marula trees just to make sure that there's no kills. This is a good example of a marula tree up to our right over here, and the horizontal branches which you can see over here are ones that you would likely find a leopard sleeping on, or somewhere in and around the forks of this tree you may find a kill wedged in out of the way of hyena and making it difficult for lion to steal. There doesn't appear to be any kills in this tree. You do actually have to look very carefully for kills in trees. They don't stick out as clearly as you'd think they would. It's not like a big bright red carcass hanging out of the tree, which would make our lives a lot easier. And what you should look for whilst scanning through a tree like this is kind of any obscurities, a branch growing straight down towards the ground, which naturally doesn't happen. Usually plants grow up towards the sun. So vertically facing downward branch could in fact be the leg of an impala or one of the prey items that a leopard may have killed. But I think it's safe to say that this marula tree is clear of any sign of leopards. But as we continue driving through this area, please do help me search and scan either up in the trees or wherever you're feeling lucky, really. It could be anywhere. Great question through from Chris in Arizona, and he's wondering, have I ever been in a scenario where whilst driving through the bush off-road or under any trees has a snake fallen into the vehicle? And no, it hasn't personally happened to me, but I do know friends of mine who it's happened to. You can imagine absolute pandemonium and chaos. It's often when you're off-roading when that actually does happen, and you typically off-road when you're looking at animals from the big five, usually all of which are somewhat dangerous. So you then get stuck in the scenario of having a snake in the vehicle and lions that you're following outside the vehicle. So then what do you do? It hasn't happened to me though. Interesting story about snakes though that I will tell you is that once I arrived at a waterhole for evening sundowners, and I stopped and parked the vehicle next to a small bush, kind of like the one just on our left here. And I just asked Jean-Ray to keep the camera there, and I'm going to jump out quickly. When out on safari, what you do is you stop for sundowners, or actually morning coffee, and all the morning coffee and cold drinks are kept on the back of the vehicle. So I jumped out the front of the vehicle, set up the table ahead of the hood of the car, and then myself and my tracker were walking between the bush and the vehicle, kind of exactly how we park now, to go and collect all the bits and pieces we needed from the back of the vehicle. And as I walked the first time towards the back of the car, I felt some kind of moisture hit me on the face. So my natural instinct was to look up. Nothing peed on me, so I carried on and thought I may have been losing my mind. Went back, dropped off some bits and pieces in front of the vehicle and then went back to collect some more goodies. And when that happened for the second time, I got a full spray in my face. Thankfully, I was still wearing my aviators, my sunglasses, which you don't ever see us wearing these days. Anyway, and I realized, oh no, hang on, this moisture isn't coming from above, it's coming from this bush. And as I looked closer into the bush, I realized it was a Mozambican spitting cobra that was spitting at me every time we walked past. So some interesting things do happen, but thankfully snakes are more scared of us than we are scared of them. And that's something very important to remember. They will generally avoid us at all costs, and if we just stay out of their way as best as possible, they will tend to leave us alone. On the topic of snakes, we had a request earlier on from Anna Marie, and she is hoping that we could find her a black mamba. It's one of the most venomous snakes we find in this area. Neurotoxic venom that basically shuts down your organs, causing you, understandably, to stop working, with all your vital organs not working. And you'd also like to know what they feed on mainly, and they've got a wide variety of food that they'll feed on, but birds as well as small rodents are going to be high up on their menu. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up the speed a little bit. We don't have much time, so I don't think it's actually going to work out, Anna Marie, but there are, or at least last summer there was resident black mamba on the quarantine clearings that I saw a handful of times, only brief sightings, and we're not far from there, but I don't think close enough to go searching for it, and even that, the search would be an absolute miracle if we found them. I've said it once before, and I will say it again, that you do need to be careful about what you believe when watching documentaries on various channels, as often they can be misleading. And the supposed snake wranglers who pull snakes out of jungles that they're running through are often using snakes that have been pre-captured and released for them to catch. So they're not slithering about around every corner. What a great morning it's been. I hope you've all enjoyed it. A lot of great bird watching was had, and I'm told that Leanne, hiding in California, is being a little bit reluctant to start her bird list. So Leanne, please come on, see if you can get to at least 50 birds, and then call it quits when you get to 50. That's the least you can do for us, but give it a chance. I'm told you need some help getting onto the bird watching scene, and it certainly is worth your while. I promise you, you will not regret it. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on safari. Great work on camera, Jean-Andre, and well done to Tara for directing the show, and Nikki for lending her hand. Jerry, thanks for joining us, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. The highlight for me was certainly having that big elephant bull coming right up to the vehicle and giving us a sniff early on. Over to Jamie, and we'll see you this afternoon.
Well, guys, it's been a morning where Wendy has been slightly plagued with gremlins every now and again, but I've still had a fantastic time being out and being out half an hour earlier. Now I have a quick request for you all. Please can you help me out with finding a bit more information? I know that Granny Joe, you wanted to know, Granny Billy Joe, you wanted to know more about that white-faced mongoose. Please help me out, guys. Anyway, as we come to the end of our sunrise safari, a big thanks to Tebs and to Tara, Nikki and FC. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we will catch you later for the sunset safari. Have a great day, everybody.